International Women's Day Inspiring Change panel. It is my pleasure to welcome our panelists for our very first panel to this stage. Today we have Andrea Carter, Sue Odell, Carrie Purcell, and MA Foreman. We'll have everyone else sort of turn their cameras off. We're going to give the full focus to our panelists today, and the panel will be recorded. So according to the United Nations Progress on Sustainability Goals, it will take 286 years or more to close the global gender gap. Women's representation in positions of power and decision-making remains below parity. By recognizing accomplishments of women, we value her contribution while inspiring other women to do the same. And so today we are here celebrating International Women's Day today, recognizing women from diverse industries, the voices, the perspectives, the words of wisdom, and really the inspiration and hope for building a more equitable and inspiring future for generations. And actually, you know, I want to live the next 50 years in that world. I don't want to wait 286 years. We simply can't. So today, I'd like to introduce Andrea Carter. She is a neuroscience-based equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging senior consultant and strategist. Andrea, I'm just going to have you share a little bit about yourself before we begin.
Hi, thank you, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. I'm excited to be here today. And really quick, so I'm essentially a researcher at heart. I've created the first belonging in the workplace survey to actually measure belonging in the workplace, and then also be able to look at the methodology to measure the intersections of identity. So we really truly get real data that shows true equity and inclusion in the workplace.
Beautiful. Thank you, Andrea. I also have to say you are one of our Woman of Inspiration, Woman Driving Change book contributors, and we value being part of that leadership voice that's going to help drive change forward. So happy to have you here today. Next, I'd like to introduce Carrie Purcell. She's the Vice President, Digital Games at Relish Solutions in Toronto, Ontario, which is an interactive studio creating games, apps, websites, animation products, and I think you're into a little bit of the NFT world as well. So Carrie, welcome. I'll have you say a few words about yourself.
Thank you, Monica. Hello, everyone. First, just a shout out to Monica and the Universal Women's Network for putting this together. I mean, just in the 15 minutes we've been together, I'm so genuinely inspired by the women and the people surrounding us, their backgrounds, their missions, their words. So really, really pleased to be here with all of you this morning. And yes, Monica, thank you for that brief introduction. In terms of my background, so I very much sit in the tech space where design meets development. I'm probably best known for my work in the metaverse space. I was one of the first founders of a metaverse platform for education pre-pandemic, but we certainly found our place and got known during the pandemic. I also, in the background, run a women-owned, operated consultancy where we focus primarily on future of education and future of work solutions. So looking at things like how to, again, with the metaverse technology, how to really harness technology, in some cases to disrupt spaces like higher education, which really need opportunities for things like micro-credentialing, helping to get all kinds of people upskilled in a pace that really matches what's happening in the workplace. And that leads a little bit into some of the future of work that we do. I mean, we're surrounded by people that have so much amazing background in this space, but really we're looking at ways to reduce bias in both recruitment and promotion of talent. A little bit about what I do in the background. Yeah.
That's a whole lot, and really excited to learn, like just trailblazing in spaces that, I mean, we're really just still evolving into. I think about where the internet was many, many moons ago, and the WWW and how much it's growing. So lots of interesting conversations there. Thank you for joining us, Carrie. Next up, I would like to introduce Susan Odell. She is a technology executive with 25 plus years of global experience across sales channels, professional services, and operations. Susan, I had an opportunity to jump in and see you on a panel earlier this afternoon with the Invest Ottawa, and I'm so happy you're a part of the Universal Women's Network. Welcome, and I'll just have you say a few words about yourself today.
Thank you, Monica. Glad you were able to sit in on that. Thank you for inviting me to participate today. I mean, it's an important time for women. I mean, it's always an important time, but I think that there's momentum. The community of allies that we have supporting women, not as tokens, but supporting us in terms of our real value that we bring to the world and to business. So the momentum and continuing it is so important. I'm on the other side of the tech world than Carrie. I'm not an engineer. I have high technical aptitude for a non-engineer. I'll put it that way. But I've been on the business side for quite a while, but I've also been surrounded by men my entire career. I'm involved in merger and acquisition type of integrations on the pre and post transaction side of things. And that's definitely historically and continues to be a boys' club, but I love breaking ground in that space. My reputation is that of a corporate fixer and helping people solve big problems around operational profitability. I love what I do. And I just want to be a good representation for women coming up behind me and beside me, that there is no ground we cannot break. So I'm happy to be here to be a part of the conversation.
Beautiful. I love that. The fixer. We need lots of fixers. We got lots of fixing to do here. So glad to have you today and to hear your perspective on the conversations. MA Foreman, we missed you in Calgary, by the way, by just a hair last week. And MA is the founder and CEO of SupportHER, an advisory firm for the silver economy. So MA, let's jump in. I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself. If you want to, the stage is yours.
Thanks so much, Monica. And I'll definitely echo the comments, especially from Carrie's perspective of just thank you for inviting me to participate in this conversation, and certainly how Andrea and Susan highlighted the importance of the conversation. It's pretty easy to step back and just say, wow, when you look across the room of who you've really brought together and who you often bring together in terms of our respective backgrounds and areas of passion and knowledge. So I'm really excited to be here and part of this conversation. As you mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of SupportHER. We're a purpose-driven business operating in the aging care sector, or within the silver economy, serving our older citizens and trying to impact quality of life. And for me, it is definitely both a personal and professional choice to spend my time in this sector. I really look at aging through the lens of it not being an illness, it being the social condition that we all experience. So there's a universality in aging, and my hope is really to provide impact-driven decisions to aging care leaders that really have an impact for people on a day-to-day basis. And the kind of secret sauce within that is how we approach humanizing the decision-making. It really is coming from a very human-centered lens and understanding what citizens, including ourselves, want, regardless of our age. And so the secret is the age doesn't really matter, but because we have such a sector that's wrapped around health and social care, we're trying to bridge that in a very different way. And so, yeah, happy to be here, happy to be from the East Coast. I'm in New Brunswick, and really excited for the meaningful conversation today.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Emmy. So we're going to jump into our first opening question that I'm going to be posing to all of you, which we had an intro with our guests that joined us today. Why is it so important to celebrate not just today, but every single day, to elevate females in leadership roles? Andrea, why is this so important to you to celebrate women?
Yeah, so in research, there's this term called corporeal invisibility. And the term corporeal refers to the physical body, and invisibility refers to the state of being unseen. But what's interesting about this, and I'm going to contextualize this for us. So it's often associated with soldiers wearing camouflage and becoming invisible to the enemy so that they can invade and take over. But in recent years, it's actually showing up in association with women in the workplace because of women's physical absence from leadership. So I just want to talk really quickly about this. And what I find so interesting is that it directly applies to this question, because the research shows that when women in a singular form become highly visible, the perception is that they are trespassing on the masculine world of leadership. So again, this isn't my opinion. This is what the research is showing. And if you track this research, which is something I've been doing for the past 20 years, the newest studies actually show that women, in order for us to counterbalance the sentiment of trespassing or invading cultural norms or stereotypes or social values or expectations in the workplace, in this negative sense, we actually have to endorse women, and we need more women to be visible so that we can actually normalize equity. So what's also very interesting about this research is that not only does the endorsement need to come from men, it also needs to come from women. And this is a key point to my belonging research, because until leadership practices are recognized in concert, so everyone playing music together with a harmony, in order for us to be able to see that, we actually need women being represented so that that sentiment of us invading will continue to lessen, and defensive patterning can actually be reduced. So we cannot thrive, we cannot grow, we cannot innovate if we're in this defensive spot. And so this is also part of why every day should be a recognition of seeing women in leadership and women showing up.
Beautiful way to open this up, and what an interesting, valuable perspective that you're sharing that we should be talking more about. And as you know, I was very strategic in having our allyship conversation, because it should not be on our shoulders completely, but yes, men and women together showing up, working towards that common goal, that's a united goal, is going to be game changing. So thank you, Andrea, for sharing with us. Susan.
Yeah, so I think I believe in the long game. I think often in every aspect of our lives, we get tactical, and the long game is all about persistence and knowing that things don't change overnight. So that's why celebrating women every day, micro, even in lessons learned, right? Celebrating a learning moment, celebrating an achievement, celebrating a challenge. Those micro celebrations add up. And if we aren't consistent in celebrating women at every opportunity we can, being advocates for each other with our allies, if we don't do that, then 10 years from now, we'll be sitting here in the same place that we are today. Like, I've been in tech long enough that I would say, sadly, the boardroom still hasn't changed very much. Andrea, to your point in your research, it's a bit depressing that, you know, when I'm in the boardroom, the number of women at the table is approximately the same as it was 20 years ago. But at the Invest Ottawa panel that I was on, they're actually instituting requirements for their startups and scale ups to have the percentage of founders contributing that they approve. They're actually implementing rules, and that's going to have an impact as those startups become scale ups and those scale ups become massive companies. You're going to have a higher number of women at the executive table, and they're stressing the importance of the percentage of women at the board level. So there's a top down as well as a bottom up increase in the representation. So celebrating women in every aspect is important, and sticking to it for the long game is critical. You can't, this is like a way of living and a way of being in our professional lives, period, full stop.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Susan. I know Andrea and I have a conversation about the tech world and some of the opportunities that they're going to be using in the tech world to sort of, you know, encourage or actually really mandate that transparency, starting with tech, where companies have to be visible about their EDI effectiveness and their training. So
I think the desire has changed. Like, so when I say what I said about the boardroom not changing, that's the reality of the way it is today. But the mindset is changing. There's a real commitment to it, and I think we should be celebrating that as much as celebrating women.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. Thank you so much, Susan. MA, I'm going to turn this stage over to you. Why is it so important to be celebrating today and every day?
Yeah, thanks, Monica. I definitely appreciate, Andrew, the context and the reference point from a validation perspective that you provided. Certainly stretched my mind, and I'm going to take some of those into my conversations. And Susan, you highlighted both downstream and upstream effort, right? And so, and I think that's a important aspect of the conversation in terms of making sure we don't take our eye off the long game, but at the same time, what are we doing in real time? Because the answer in my mind is pretty straightforward. 286 years doesn't cut it. Like, we should all be feeling a sense of urgency and necessity. I know in my work within the aging care sector, that's what gets me up in the morning, is that people need the change. People are deserving of the change. And knowing also that if we can make that change and impact in that area, we're actually doing it for everyone. And the same argument applies, or the same rationale applies, if we think about it in terms of gender parity. And, you know, we don't have to look far. Susan, I certainly appreciate the comments you talk from a governance perspective. Same thing. I'm chair of a nominations committee, and it's a struggle, right? The mindset is there. I agree. The mindset is there, but actually getting the composition to reflect that mindset or to realize that mindset, it is a challenge. We certainly can look at pay equity and everything that's happening, whether it's boardroom table, leadership position, founder status. Those things are, we've got to keep those front and center. And we can also still look within our own homes. I think we still don't have sort of an equal balance when we think about the family chore chart often, right? Or, you know, certainly we have lots of great relationships, I'm sure, in our homes with our partners, but from a societal perspective, you know, we all know the saying of, you know, you've got to work in your career like you're full-time, and then you've got to parent and mother at home like you're full-time. Like, we all feel that stuff on a day-to-day basis. And certainly I would speak from my generation's perspective. And so I think at the end of the day, until it is normalized, and I can't remember, Susan or Andrew, if you use that comment, or Monica, I love that reference to normalizing. Until it's normalized, it's necessary. Like that, it's that cut and dry from my perspective, and certainly the onus is on all of us to do it on the daily. So I love that reference that Susan shared.
That was Andre. I'm not gonna take
sorry.
that.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Then Andrew will give you the points on that one for sure. But yeah, so that's my take in, Monica.
Beautiful. Thank you. And Carrie, lastly, why is it so important to celebrate women today and every day?
I'm going to keep my answer fairly short. It resonates across everything that people have shared, and it's simply, it's not simple, but it's simply a platform to be heard. Everybody who has given these beautiful and researched and experienced and lived responses already on our platform has brought these amazing perspectives. And I'm going to give a really small everyday example. I get talked over a lot. I get talked over from people at my level, from people below my level, from people above my level, all the time. And you know, I'm listening to myself. I have a bit of a soft voice, and let's say it's that. Now, when I say I get talked over by people, I get talked over by men. I don't get talked over by women. And it makes it challenging to be heard on an everyday basis in organizations where I hold senior positions. I've founded, you know, and I have to find these tactical ways of saying, oh, I wasn't done. Nope, I'm still talking. You know, let me clarify. And this is a place to be heard for all of the reasons that my very, very distinguished panelists have already spoken to, but simply put. So thank you.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing, Carrie. And my hope is that we're recording this and that we will be sharing these panels and the conversations on a wider, broader level where it gets into the hands of the individuals where they're like, maybe I could do better. And maybe this has inspired action to make change. So thank you for that. And really thank you to all of you for, you know, the next conversation and your authenticity and your transparency and really speaking from what is meaningful to you to make that change. We're going to jump into embracing equality, which is the theme for this year's International Women's Day. What I'd like to know is, what are those barriers that are still facing you today in your own industries? What are the barriers and how are you overcoming them? Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? Andrea.
So this is actually part of what sparked my research years ago. And I'll kick us off by saying there's a really easy saying that goes, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, equality is everyone being given dancing shoes, equity is everyone being given dancing shoes that actually fit them, and then belonging is being able to play your favorite song and have everyone accept you for playing that song, even if they don't love that song. So when we look at these pieces, I'm going to talk about my personal experience with this first. So I've done a lot of panels, and years ago, what happened to me was that I was the only white woman who was standing up for the fact that we were having panels that actually didn't have women of color on the panels. And so I made it my rule that I would not participate on a panel unless there were women of color also being represented. And this was happening, consistently. And what continued to happen in my experience was that when it came time to divide up the time, there was always another white woman who was incredibly, talented, had made it to high leadership ranks, but she would call me separately and she would talk about the injustice of not having as much time because women of color were now on the panel and she wasn't going to get as much airtime. So I'm bringing this up because through the research that I've shown, what we've continued to do is we've continued to look at cohorts of descriptive statistics. And what that means is we look at how we describe people through one element. So I'm a female, so that's the only descriptor I get. And that's actually one of the biggest blocks that we have right now, because when we're not seeing how our descriptors are intersected, and what that means is I am not only a woman, I'm a white woman, I'm a mother, I'm a researcher, all of these pieces, and this is, within all of the research has shown that belonging completely changes. The data completely changes when we look at just one descriptor versus an intersection of those descriptors. So when we actually put measurements to how to measure belonging and what those 5 indicators are that you have to have in order for belonging to exist, and we then analyze the data to look at what are the predictors of belonging? Well, the predictors are gender, ethnicity, and career level. Lo and behold, I know it's not that shocking, but here's the thing that changes. It changes when we actually look and we do the steps, the methodology to actually understand how being a woman, career level, and then our ethnicity actually changes our perception of how we belong and who perceives that we do belong. So with that, when we look at moving forward and we look at creating spaces where equity can occur, most people don't realize that exclusion or ostracization within the workplace isn't just a female problem. It's an intersection of those 3 predictors. It's an intersection of gender, it's an intersection of ethnicity, and it's an intersection of career level. And so when we look at having women be represented, and I'll go back to that corporeal invisibility, because here's the problem. When we look at equity, this means that we actually have to have all women represented, not just one white woman, which is what it has been in, to Susan's point about what she sees on the boards, or not be a token on a space where there's only a small amount of women. If we go back to that and we go back to invading spaces, really that underlying current, we have to start looking at embracing all women and celebrating all women. So, you know, I think it was Amy, am I saying that correctly?
I'll take either, Andrea. Amé is the French version and Amy's the English version. Either one is fine.
Well, it's very important for me to get that right because names are actually so important. So when we look at the context of what you had said about, you know, oh, I'll give that point to Andrea. We have to start looking at all of our contributions. And so every single element, all of the faces and spaces that you see on this panel are super important to raise that vibration and raise that awareness up so that as a collective, we become a belonging cohort rather than an exclusionary cohort.
If I could go next, Monica, because I want
Yes.
to key off of what Andrea said. So the panel I was in on Monday, I gave an example. It was a similar question. And I gave an example that speaks to everything you just said. So the biggest barrier in my career, and I don't like the word barrier because I believe in crashing through or getting over or around, navigating past it. But the greatest friction for me has been the role people assume I have when they meet me for the first time. So I'm either in administration or I'm an intermediate level resource. I can't possibly be an executive. Right. So even last year, I was at an industry event and there was an executive that I wanted to meet relevant to my job. And they looked at me and they looked right through me. And then about 20 minutes later, somebody introduced me to them and their whole disposition changed. And that's a subconscious bias. They were a lovely person. Like, no, I know it wasn't intentional, but I have to work harder than white women and harder than men to establish credibility with those cohorts. So I love your summary that you just provided, Andrea. It's completely accurate. There's gender, there's race, there's role, there's your ability of being able. Like if you're disabled, you have now another, and I don't like the word disabled, depending on your level of ability, you have another barrier of bias that you have to overcome. And then sometimes it's not until I deliver my first piece of work to that person who is subconsciously biased to finally prove that I am an equal, right? Or so I just love that. I just wanted to contribute that to say, this will never change. In my lifetime, it will never change. In my daughter's lifetime, it will not change, but hopefully it will happen less often if we continue this work.
Yes, beautiful. Emma?
Yeah, I'm enjoying taking in everybody's remarks. I mean, I think in terms of challenge, I certainly relate to the comments that Andrea made, and in terms of how you are seen as a white woman and that experience. And I think I'm thinking back to your original question, Monica, which is about sort of the challenges. And I think the challenge ultimately is to check our own biases, not just to check everybody else's. And so I know I'm trying to do that at a high level of consciousness on a daily basis, but it requires an awareness, if you will, and a commitment to lean into in conversations that matter. And those conversations that matter mean that I have to make effort to surround myself and engage with people who are unlike myself. And so I'm thinking even of a conversation we had within our own team about people and culture, and we're very fortunate. 90% of our team is female, and at the same token, we have quite a level of diversity within our team, and I'm really proud of that, but more so I'm learning from that, right? And I think just taking sort of ownership and recognizing that is really important, because it's it's challenging to navigate and to really sort of just step back and say, I'm just going to listen, right? And for someone who likes to talk, I think that's probably the most important thing, that that I'm doing currently is really trying to employ that. And there's so many parallels, especially Andrea, when you were speaking, there's so many parallels that really resonate with me within the aging care sector, because the demographic is seen as homogeneous. And so when you talk about the intersectionality from that perspective, and so for me, I'm also processing in this conversation all of those parallels, all of the learnings that I will gain out of this conversation, and how to take them and apply equity in the space that I'm working in with our team on a daily basis. So yeah, I'll leave it there, and happy to pass the baton.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Emmy. Carrie.
Thank you. I'm going to come from a bit of a different perspective, and a lot of the themes that are important in what I'm going to talk about have been brought up from other points of view. One of the biggest challenges that I face, while I could speak to personal barriers that have personally affected me, one of the biggest challenges is the talent pipeline that I have access to in work. So I talked at the beginning about being at the intersection of design and development. And we find that in design, and I do teach at the School of Design at George Brown College as well, we put a lot of emphasis behind user-centered design, trying to really understand who our users are, who our diverse users are. We use the word empathy a lot, right? So we may not have all of those users represented in the room, but we're using techniques and empathy to really try to get in the shoes and the minds and understand those user journeys, those paths that they're going to take through our, typically through our digital designed tools. Interestingly, and not surprisingly, on the development side, we do not have, we don't have a lot of diversity. Let's just say that we don't have a lot of diversity. And when I look at tactical ways to try to change that, the barrier I face is I don't have a talent pool to add that diversity. I have, and Andrea spoke to this in a really thorough researched way, and I know Susan spoke to this in her personal experience, we have a lot of people that come from the same programs, that live in the same environments, that bring the same socioeconomic experiences. And the risk of that in technology is very interesting, because it comes out in the digital tools that we produce, right? And it's a huge risk. So we have these really, really big examples with the rise of AI. We absolutely have to be aware of bias in data sets. We have to be aware of bias in the thoughts and the language that the programmers are using. And to me, that's the impetus, with keeping in mind everything that everybody else brought today. Like, that is the impetus to having diverse voices and perspectives in the room. And this has been spoken to, but I talk a lot about diversity being broad. I bring my personal experience, of course I do. I'm always open and willing to share it, and I'm often targeted as needing to share it or needing to represent it because of because of how I was born and the position I play in my workplace. But the reality is that that diversity is not just gendered and it's not just visual. It is economic, it is age, it is level. It's all of these very, very diverse lived experiences. And again, to Andrea's point, that intersectionality of those that speak to being user-centered, being broadly user-centered, and being as unbiased as we can be. And that is an ongoing challenge today that is more important than it may have ever been when we look at from a tech perspective, and we look at the rise of AI. As you can tell, I would continue speaking about it, but I will take a breath and pause and just share that as a view of tying together what everybody has shared, but in how it affects my everyday at work.
Beautiful. And I think that's going to be even more and more prevalent as we go to, really where our world is embracing tech. It's going to be a part of every single business in a much bigger way. So I think that's going to become a bigger issue. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Carrie. We are going to just skip to our next topic, and I'm going to start with Susan. We're going to be talking about allyship and the men and the role that men play, because I would really love to, again, make sure that we get the opportunity to discuss this and share it with the men that will be listening to this post. The evidence does show that men that are engaging into gender inclusion programs, 96% of the organizations see progress, compared to 30% of organizations where allies are not engaged. SupportHERs play a critical role. So Susan, I'm going to start with yourself and go around. Why do you believe it is so important for our allies to be part of that conversation now more than ever?
I think I'd probably like to start off by saying that male allies have been there for me from the very beginning. My first job in tech, a little over 25 years ago, I'd had no experience in tech at all. And two male founders of a small OCR company, with that age is me, but if anybody knows what that is, I'll let you Google it, gave me a straight commission sales job. And that was my foot into the door of tech. And I've worked my way up ever since then. And I've had multiple male allies that have been open and vulnerable, right? Because it's hard for them. One of my allies in my life, well, they're all in my life still, but actively involved today, we talk about the fact that he'll come to me and say, like, how do I speak about this? How do I, is it okay for me to participate in that? But the fact that he's vulnerable enough to have that conversation with me and to put himself out there is incredible. But allies are not new. There's just more of them, but they're still, they don't want to feel like they're invading our space, but they need to be in this space and in this conversation and represented, because it's not about us versus them. It's about us together, and it's about equity and belonging. And so if we don't have allies, and if we don't encourage allyship, then belonging, Andrea, can't, right? It can't occur.
Yeah.
You can't belong and then push men aside, right? So yeah, my career, I owe a lot to my allies, but they weren't tokenizing me. They saw natural ability in me and proven track record ability in me that would benefit their businesses, right? So it's a win-win. Allyship is not about tokenism, it's about win-win. So yeah, I could keep going, but we're getting short on time. That's my bit.
Thank you so much, Susan. MA.
Yeah, I'll keep this one brief as well, Monica, just to say I can relate, Susan, in terms of having some really great male allies, even early in my career. So that story really resonates with me. Yeah, I think Carrie made a really important reference. She used the term lived experience, right? And so I think at the heart of this, that's what we're all pursuing or trying to level up, if you will. It really takes just, it really takes asking people what they care about in order to make different choices. And so that includes everyone. And so I certainly agree with the sentiment that it is not about creating any divide. This is about closing gaps, not creating them. And yeah, from a very practical standpoint, I think, Susan, you made that reference to those men being vulnerable or asking. Like you just have to decide you care enough to ask, and ask a question. It doesn't have to be the right question. That's how every conversation gets started. And so no, a lot of that resonates. I think we're very fortunate. It's an important conversation to and Monica, you waved this flag from the beginning in terms of allyship, that we're not trying to create a divide. We're trying to do the opposite. And at the end of the day, their lived experience is important too. We just need to have a balanced conversation around the table. And that means it's a conversation, and conversations go two ways.
Beautiful. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. Absolutely. I spoke at the beginning about this being an opportunity to be heard. And as MA just emphasized, it's also listening. I mean, it's 100% listening and asking. And there were conversations leading up to this and questions that we thought about. And I kept just coming back to this idea that it's about listening and asking anything that's uncomfortable, that you're not sure about. It's just asking and having room to hear. And so I'm very much aligned with what we've already heard. I wanted to bring up the idea of I had been told early in my career and read throughout that you need sponsors in your career. You need sponsors, particularly at the executive leadership level. And I'm currently the only female executive at my organization. The rest are men. And so I need a male sponsor if I'm going to follow that advice, to have allyship, to have that voice, to have that support, to be heard, to be asked and understood. And I have had successes with that. I do have successes with that today. I'll drop just two more quick things in before passing it over to Andrea, because I know we're getting to time. I spend a lot of time, and I know listening to Andrea and Susan and MA that others do here too, working on data-driven decision-making, again, trying to remove that bias so that we can change the conversations that we're having today. And so, yeah, I don't have time to dig into it as much as I'd like to today, but it is so very important that we really are driving these data-driven decisions, and they are not easy, but they are purposeful, they're important, they're impactful. And the last shout out that I really want to make is I have had an amazing ally throughout my career, and that's my husband, who 100% supported me the first time that I quit my job to pursue my first master's degree, and the second time I quit my job to start a pre-revenue startup that was going to be several years in the making without any contributions, and who has just equally allowed me to have as many opportunities as I wanted and allowed him to have without questioning. Over to Andrea.
Thanks, Carrie. I love the comment, of course, about data-driven decisions, because they're so important, which is why, it's really exciting to see more of the work of intersectionality come out. When it comes to allyship, I would say that as everyone has already noted, Susan and MA and yourself, that, really what we're looking at is to be heard. So belonging actually boils down to 5 indicators: comfort, connection, contribution, psychological safety, and well-being. What that means is I see you, I know you, or I want to know you, I value you, I accept you, and I care about you. So in very basic language. And with all of those, that requires you to have a respect for being heard, because being seen also encompasses being heard. So when it comes to allyship, the way that this tactically falls into place is we have to look at starting with educating self. We actually can't create a belonging environment until we have people who are willing to be open and educate self. From that element, it's learning and listening, and then examining and challenging our own bias, our own privileges, our own prejudices, and also really working through the feelings of guilt, shame, and defensiveness. So one of the reasons that I went into studying belonging was actually because equity, diversity, and inclusion was creating so much defensive patterning that people were not willing to actually listen to what is needed in order for us to move the dial. And so belonging was actually a word that allowed people's brains to be open to understand more and want to lean in and take more. And so those are elements where we work through those pieces so that we can hear, so that we start to develop behaviors and skills where we're consistently showing up for our people and having each other's back. And that is how the art of collaboration moves forward and how belonging really comes to fruition. So I just want to thank everyone. Thank you for making us all feel that we belong in this space as well, Monica, and for creating such a powerful panel this morning.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. I know we have just about a minute left, and I really appreciate and respect all of your perspectives and your lived shared experiences. I'm going to have one final question, because I really love to find out how you do it all. What is your sacred, like, I am doing this every single day to be the best I can be, to lead the teams, to move forward. What is that one thing that you all do every single day, without a doubt, that sets your day, your year, your mind up for success? Sue.
Thank you for letting me go first, because I do have to drop for another meeting. What do I do every day? I wake up and I think about the things I'm grateful for every single day. And I end my day with reflecting on one thing, maybe two, maybe three, that I feel really good about in the day. And sometimes there are days where it's just like my oatmeal was really good this morning because the rest of it was really challenging, but the oatmeal rocked, you know? So gratitude in the morning and thankfulness in the evening.
Beautiful.
Okay, see you later. Thank you, Monica, very much. This has been a blast. Great to meet you all. Bye-bye.
Monica, did you tag me?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So similarly, I'm a big believer in the miracle morning and the morning savers, which really just gives you sort of a guidepost to follow, which includes silence and reflection and the visioning and certainly the gratitude piece that Susan mentioned. From a very practical standpoint, it took me a lot of years to master meditation. And one of the things that was really helpful for me was the heart math technique. And the heart math technique is really about building resilience. So if you ask me what I do every day, that would be actually my go-to, is using heart math to build resilience, because fighting the good fight and being purpose-driven definitely takes a vast amount of resilience when the days are tough. So that would be my practical suggestion to people.
Beautiful. Carrie, and then